Let's come back from the lunch break, please. Okay, it is, Teresa, you okay? Okay. We are back after a lunch break. Let me just briefly um, uh, remind folks about the platform protocol. Um, if you are a board member and are comfortable on screen, you are invited to be on screen at all times. If you go off screen, that's fine. Um, it's just a matter of folks wanting to know that folks are listening. Um, if you turn off your screen, maybe to walk around or snack or what have you, um, just just turn off your screen. That's fine. Um, for all of the panelists, board members, lawyers, and party representatives, if you would please be sure to stay on mute, and for the lawyers and party representatives off screen, please, if uh, if you're not speaking. So it's 1 o'clock, and this is one of our 29 uh, public comment sessions. It's the first of them. Um, we have 10 public commenters uh, indicating a desire to speak during this session. All of you, please remember that there is a 5-minute limit on your comment. Certainly, you don't need to go 5 minutes if what you have to say can be said less than that. Comment is taken under oath and is subject to questioning because all comment and testimony pursuant to the board's statute and rulemaking rules is taken under oath and subject to questioning. Let me just say for um, the lawyers and party representatives who perhaps haven't been on a complex hearing with me before, um, I understand it's your right to cross-examine members of the public, but I discourage it. And without going into a full-blown discussion as to why that might be, mostly I don't think it's productive. It has never been productive. And I've been doing this for 22 years. So I'm not going to call on you and ask you if you have questions of any of these members of the public. If you actually have a question of a member of the public, you're going to have to put something in the chat to me to indicate that, in fact, you have questions you need to ask that member of the public. Otherwise, I'm going to move from one public commenter to the next without stopping. Board members, the same for you, please. I'm not going to call on you to ask you if you have questions of a particular member of the public. If you do, please put something in the chat. Okay, so let me call out the order in which I will be calling on you. This is the order in which the request was sent to Pam Jones, our board administrator. And just generally, I will ask you if you swear to tell the truth, swear or affirm, and I will ask you to spell your name so that the transcript is correct. And I will ask you to speak loudly and clearly. And it may take me a moment to unmute each of you. Public comment will be given by audio, not video. So this is the order in which I'll be calling all of you. Sharon Wilson, Brent Stoneking, Clinton Wisenant, John Alexander, Sid Goodlow, Michael Perino, Todd Hathorn, David LeBlanc, and Joan Brown, and Kaylee Shoop. Again, 5 minutes, and I'm going to start with Sharon Wilson. So, sorry, this is just going to take me a moment each time. I don't see Sharon Wilson on the platform. Ms. Wilson, if you are on the platform and I am missing your name here, it's all alphabetical, please reach out through the chat. By the way, if someone has signed up to offer public comment and find themselves unable to be there at the time they've signed up, that's perfectly fine. I will take them the next time they come onto the platform. It's not a problem. All right, so I'm going to pass Sharon Wilson and go to Brent Stone King. Let's see if Brent Stone King is with us. I am not seeing Brent Stone King either. Mr. Stone King, if you're on the platform, please reach out through the chat and I will unmute you. Clinton Wisenant. Oh, I see Mr. Wisenant, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. It's not my intention. Mr. Wisenant, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great. I can hear you. You're a little soft. If you would please raise your right hand. And do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
I do.
And would you please spell your first and last name?
First name is Clinton, Clinton. Last name is Wisenant, and thank you for pronouncing it perfectly.
Oh,
Whisonant.
thank you. Your 5 minutes starts now.
Okay, I'll be brief. I just I've read through as best I could and as quick as I could the bill, and my concern is the additional paperwork requirements that it's going to impose on an already very restricted in this state industry. Gas and oil is, I'm from Bernalillo County, Albuquerque, but as a citizen of the county and of the state, gas and oil contributes a great deal to the economy of the state. It also contributes considerably to the energy independence of the nation. And I think anything that we would do to hinder or restrict this industry would be bad for the country and for the state and for the county. So that's my concern, is that we should minimize the paperwork requirements. We should let the experts decide how the industry will comply with standards, which I agree should be set, but not descriptions on requirements in a law or a regulation that tells the industry how to meet these standards. And that's essentially my comments. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Wisenant. All right, let's move to John Alexander, if he is on the platform with us. Let's see here. Mr. Alexander, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
I certainly do.
Thank you. Would you please spell your first and last name?
Yes, ma'am. It's John, John, and then Alexander, conventional spelling, Alexander.
Thank you very much. If you would please, your 5 minutes starts now.
Hey, thank you very much. We appreciate the opportunity to address y'all. This is just an extremely important issue that all in both parties. And when I listened to the opening statements this morning, we can all agree on that. It's extremely important. It's also an extremely technical issue, and the Environmental Improvement Board certainly has a big job in front of it because of the amount of technical things that are going on here. Uh, Energy is just extremely important to this state, and so as is clean air and clean water. I don't think there's anyone in this group that would certainly want to have any sort of activity that would harm our environment. I mean, we don't do that. We all breathe the same air. We all drink the same water. Energy is just extremely important. That's what drives us. That's what's driven our community, our state, to be where we are today, which is one of the, as was pointed out earlier this morning in testimony, the second highest producing state in oil and gas in New Mexico. And while we're all aware of that, we're aware of the importance that brings to us an issue of trying to avoid adversarial positions seems would be extremely critical for y'all at this time. There's a lot of testimony being presented from both sides that is going to be extremely useful in making this decision. And so I just pray and ask that as the board considers it, they carefully consider the testimony that's being presented from this very, very technical issue. Listening to all this technical stuff is going to get a little boring, I'm sure, at some point. But it's also critical, and you have a big decision on your part. So thank you for your time. I just ask that you seriously listen to both sides and try to avoid the emotional standpoints that we often get into. Society is way too divided anyway, and so I want to encourage you to do that. Not much technical help here, but I'll be watching y'all as well as the state, and I just again thank you for your service. We really appreciate it, and I yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alexander. Now we have Sid Goodlow. Let's see if Mr. Goodlow is on the platform with us. I don't see Mr. Goodlow, but if he joins us later, I'd be happy to take his comment. Michael Perino, let me see if we have Mr. Perino on the platform. Yes. All right. Mr. Perino, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you and see you. I don't know if you can see me. I don't see my face on the screen on my iPad.
So public comment is audio rather than video. If you would raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
I do.
Thank you very much. And if you would, let's see, I need the spelling of your last name. The first name is standard. What's the spelling of your last name?
Perino, Parrino.
Okay, thank you. Your 5 minutes starts now.
Okay, I'm a retired pediatrician. I just retired 5 months ago. I'm 78 years old, so I worked a lot longer than the average person. I live here in Bernalillo. This is my second time living in New Mexico. I've been here since 2017. Truth in lending, as they say, or truth in whatever. I do own stocks, and some of them are oil and natural gas. So I do follow the industry with great interest. To me, it's very important because I have a son who's active that's in the educational business. A great deal of the budget for education in the state of New Mexico comes from the revenues that come from the oil and natural gas business. Anything that affects those revenues affects our schools. Okay, I moved back here to be near him and my grandchildren. Energy demand is rising constantly. There seems to be no understanding of the fact that we can't escape it, that it's a necessary part of our life. If you want to see what happens when you try to escape it by overregulation or by forbidding exploration and development, then what you get is California. And I'm not sure that everybody wants to be California. Some of us do, some of us don't. Okay. We see in Europe right now a crisis developing in energy because they don't have enough of it. They've tried to rely on wind and solar, which, to be honest, solar might work in New Mexico, but not as much as they'd like. And as for wind, Britain has a quandary right now because the North Atlantic, which is supposedly a very windy ocean, hasn't been very windy of late, and they have a shortage of energy. There are shortages of coal and natural gas in Europe, and there's going to be a worldwide shortage beginning this year. If you don't believe me, go to oilprice.com and look at the price of natural gas on the market at the Henry Hub centers. It's the highest it's been in the last 7 years. If we have a cold winter, and we're predicted to have a colder than average winter this year, we're going to see very high rises in the price of natural gas. You're going to pay a lot to heat your home if you heat with natural gas. It seems to me folly when we look at California and see how high the price of petroleum and natural gas are there, for us to do anything that further limits the production of oil and natural gas. We have it, we should be exploiting it. The only country in Europe that is safe is France. The alternative to oil and natural gas is not wind and solar, which are unreliable. It's nuclear power. The only country in Europe that's doing well in the present crisis is France, which gets more than 25% of its power from the nuclear energy. We have to go that way too. If you really want to get away from the extraction of oil and natural gas for energy, then you have to go with nuclear power. But there are other aspects that people are not aware of either. The base for fertilizer is natural gas and petroleum. There's a shortage of fertilizer in Europe. In England, the two leading producers of fertilizer are shutting their plants because they say the price of natural gas is too high for them to afford to manufacture it. That will drive up the price of food. It's an incredibly complex world we live in. Everything we do seems to drive the price of everything higher.
Mr. Perino,
Transportation,
Mr. Perino, I'm
yes.
sorry to interrupt. Would you wrap up, please?
Okay, I just think we can't do without it. We must have it, and we must continue to develop it. If we don't, then we are going to see the price of everything: food, transportation, energy, heating our houses. It's all going to rise. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next person who requested a spot now is Todd Hathorn. See if Mr. Hathorn is with us. I don't see him. After that is David Leblanc. Let's see here. I see Mr. Leblanc. Mr. LeBlanc, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes, very clearly. Would you raise your right hand,
Okay.
please? And do you swear
Yes,
or
ma'am.
affirm to tell the truth?
I do.
Thank you very much. David, is the standard spelling? Would you spell LeBlanc, please?
It's L-E-B as in boy, L-A-N-C.
Thank you. Your 5 minutes begins now.
Okay, I am a resident in San Miguel County, and I really appreciated the comments of the previous gentleman about the interconnectivity of oil and gas with so many aspects of our lives, and not just food, but so many products that utilize natural gas in production of those products. But my real emphasis is from my perspective as an engineer and project manager for over 40 years. And I just wanted to say that overregulation that is a little too short-sighted, perhaps, tends to uh, diminish the capability of the operators in oil and gas to manage the environment themselves. And I'll just say that over the last several years, the company I was working for was involved in not only environmental, but water management projects for oil and gas operators, both in Texas and New Mexico. So it's an evolving technology for environmental protection technologies. And, the industry is cognizant of the need for air and water quality. Water management is one of the things that has been a huge focus, especially in the Permian Basin, where we have shale gas and in areas where there's a shortage of water. And so a lot of creative projects are underway or have been already performed to help the industry manage their water use on their properties, on their own gas properties, and reuse of water as well. My company employs a whole division that are water experts. We deal in desalination as well as water management, water reuse, any kind of water treatment. And we're applying those technologies. And so I just want to encourage the board to consider the fact that, the oil and gas industry has not just been sitting idle, that we've actually participated with the oil and gas industry, with my company, to improve water management, to improve emissions. And so I just don't want to, I would prefer flexible regulation, not one size that fits all. And this actually helps promote the problem-solving creativity. And there's going to be a cycle of environmental research and innovation. And we can apply those to continue to improve the environmental performance in our oil and gas properties. And I do want to thank the Environmental Improvement Board, how you serve our state, and for allowing me to make these public comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. LeBlanc. Our next commenter is Joan Brown. And let's see, I'm unmuting you. Sister Brown, I did see your comment in the chat, and you are correct. It is not necessary to register or sign up ahead of time. I will be accepting folks' public comment regardless. However, because we have so many public commenters in this action, and I don't have the usual signal of a sign-in sheet at the front of the auditorium to tell me what order folks might have joined us. Before I throw the platform open to anyone who reaches out through chat, I am inviting those folks who actually sent an email ahead of time. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you so much, Hearing Officer Orth. I so appreciate that clarification, because trying to get information out to the public so they know what to do and how to do it.
Sure. So if you would raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. And I know that your first and last name are the standard spelling. Let's see here. Your 5 minutes starts now.
Okay, thank you so much. Good afternoon, and thank you, Hearing Officer Orth, and also the EIB for taking these public comments on this methane pollution rule that's not about sides, but really is about the common good. And we need to take into consideration all the common good. My name is Joan Brown. I'm a Franciscan sister, and I'm the Executive Director of New Mexico Interfaith Power and Light. And our organization works with faith communities and people of faith and conscience all over our precious state to reflect upon, pray about, and then act on concerns of community, health, and environment as it relates to climate justice. We learned about methane concerns about 10 years ago and have educated our thousands of members and faith leaders, and we've offered hundreds of comments through various processes to regulate methane pollution. So this is not a new issue. We've worked with faith leaders in Southeast New Mexico, and we've also been into the homes of ordinary people down there who have been very concerned about the smells and the VOCs and what might be around them. And on one occasion, we visited with some women who were mothers in a lower income neighborhood who didn't understand the terrible odors coming into their homes. And they also had a young nephew who died of some strange cancer that was unusual. So we offered to take them into actually a field right near their backyard to witness methane pollution with powerful cameras. And a few months later, we went back and we still saw this pollution coming out. These women were very afraid even to go out into the field with us. And many of the people that are affected don't speak up because they're afraid of repercussions that might come to them because of the powers that be in their communities. Methane pollution is an environmental, economic, and a racial justice concern that needs attention and strong rules, with many of the strong recommendations that are being heard these days. In addition, it's a waste of God's resource. We use the money that comes from methane in our state for our school system, and so much of it is being wasted, it's not going to that. So it is immoral and unethical to continue with business practices that disregard God's creation and our communities. The only commandment that we are given from all religious traditions is to love our neighbor and creation. And disrespect of the health, the environment, and life that we are given to cherish is not acceptable, and it's not ethical business practices. We all have to be ethical in what our work is. Later this week, I will submit a letter signed by about 100 faith leaders from around the state who share these similar concerns about health, justice, and climate. And they also have been concerned about the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change that just said we are in a code red for humanity with climate change. And for us faith leaders, a code red means that we all together must take urgent action to care for life in our sacred home. So we have a choice to continue life and creating sacrifice zones in our state, or to live up to our true identity as a land of enchantment and a common home that respects the common good. And so we thank you for this hearing and taking very seriously these strong methane rules and recommendations that will be made. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sister. All right, we'll turn then to Kaylee Shoop. And after Ms. Shoop, Arcelia Isaias. Let's see here. Kaylee Shoop. Ms. Shoop, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Terrific. I can hear you clearly. If you would raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
I do.
Thank you. And would you spell your first and last name, please?
First name is Kayley, and last name is Shoup.
Thank you. Your 5 minutes starts now.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Kaylee Shoop, and I'm an organizer with Citizens Caring for the Future in Carlsbad. And today I will be sharing why, as a frontline community member in the Permian, I strongly support the proposed methane and ozone rules. For years, I believed, like many in my community still do, the regulatory agencies were doing their best to protect frontline communities like mine. As every day I was learning of more young people being diagnosed with cancer, I continued to believe that we were being protected, that our air was clean, that the pollution couldn't be that bad, and that maybe I was just a human that was trying to find a reason as to why I was surrounded by so much tragedy. Over the past year, I have learned that all of those beliefs were false. Those of us in frontline communities actually aren't being protected. I now know that the state does not have one air monitor that tracks methane or VOC pollution in the Permian Basin. I now know, after being out in the field and looking through a FLIR video camera, that the pollution is that bad, and it is constant. And I also understand that 2 years ago, I wasn't just a girl trying to find meaning in seeing her loved ones ravaged by cancer, but a girl that was starting to realize the danger that surrounds her and her community. Because of the abysmal lack of enforcement in the Permian, we must have stronger rules such as these being proposed today. Rules that require things like frequent inspections, especially at sites near schools and neighborhoods. Rules that can be realistically enforced, such as I believe these rules can be. They are currently our only line of defense against methane and VOC pollution. I'm not sure how the governor or NMED plans to slash methane pollution that they aren't properly monitoring, but I do believe these rules are a start. As a community member in the region of the state that contributes the most to the New Mexico state budget, I believe the least the state can do is implement the proposed rules. This week, concerned citizens and leaders that call or have called the Permian home will be submitting a letter to the EIB voicing our support for NMED's rules. When we prioritize the needs of the communities most affected by methane and VOC pollution first and foremost, when we work to protect the health and lives of those human beings in frontline communities, when we value doing what is right and not just politically simple, we set off a ripple that becomes a wave, and that wave makes real and meaningful change. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Shoop. As I go to unmute Arcelia Isaias Gastitum, and please correct me if I have mispronounced your name, to unmute her. Let me ask if there's anyone else on the platform who would very much like to speak now and not at one of the other 28 opportunities we'll have for public comment. Please reach out through the chat. So, Ms. Isaias Gastito, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Would you raise your right hand, please? And do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
I swear.
Thank you. And if you would please both pronounce and spell all of your names.
Yes, I hope you're all hydrated, hearing officer. So it's spelled Arcelia Isaias Gastelum, and it's spelled Arcelia, last name Isais Gastelum.
Thank you very much. Your 5 minutes starts now.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, board members, as well. And good afternoon. My name's Arcelia, and I'm a board member with New Mexico Interfaith Power and Light. And I'm here to ask that you vote to support and strengthen the New Mexico Environment Department's draft rules to address ozone precursor pollutants from oil and gas operations. As a young adult who has dedicated my education and entire professional career to working to address climate change, I believe stopping pollution is a crucial first step and is also necessary for protecting our communities. From a moral, physical, and spiritual standpoint, we can no longer afford to keep sacrificing the health of our people for short-term economic gain. We saw how detrimental this was during the COVID-19 pandemic, and right now we have an opportunity and responsibility to learn from these hardships and do better. Our state has some of the worst methane pollution in the country. In addition to causing a quarter of the global warming we are experiencing, methane operations also release compounds into our air that cause respiratory diseases and increase risks of cancer. These effects have disproportionate impacts on our children, and it is for them that I wanted to draw attention to today. This country has repeatedly empowered industries who routinely put our children at risk. It's become so normalized and expected. There's now an entire generation of kids who are growing up and realizing they're beholden to a system that agreed to put their future at stake so previous generations could turn a profit. And it's for these kids that we need to right these wrongs. They are acutely aware of everything that is going on at a level that has never been as accessible as it is today. They are watching, and I ask that you show them that we won't keep sacrificing their well-being for temporary gains. I share the concerns these kids have for our futures, and for this reason, I ask that you strengthen the methane rules to ensure frontline communities are protected by routinely inspecting for and fixing leaks where 70% of the emissions are coming from, and by cutting pollution caused by pneumatic controllers. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. I don't have anyone else in the chat indicating a desire to offer public comment at this time. That being the case, we will have another public comment session at 5 o'clock today, and at 9 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, and 5 o'clock tomorrow. The best way to have your name called is to send an email to Pamela Jones, the board administrator, and I will call on your name. I will also, as I am right now, throw it open to anyone on the platform who would like to reach out through the chat. Going once. Okay. We've come to the end of public comment, and we'll return to the technical session at this point. Ms. Katz, the parties you prepared what we've been referring to as a spreadsheet on the order of topics. Would you perhaps walk the board members, just describe what's happening here in the spreadsheet?
Sure, I'm happy to do that, Madam Hearing Officer. So the spreadsheet puts together, it lists all the topics that we expect to cover in the rulemaking. So there's a topic, rule section, subsection, or paragraph column in column B. I don't know if everybody has the spreadsheet to look at. And then there's a description of either, if it's a rule section, there's a description of that section, or else there's nothing there if it's not an actual rule section. Then we have all the parties that entered appearances and submitted technical testimony. There's several rows. All the first set of rows identify the witnesses who presented direct technical testimony who pre-filed testimony on that particular subject. And then if you scroll across the columns to column Q, it identifies whether parties submitted rebuttal technical testimony. And then there's a list of all the rebuttal witnesses associated with each topic. And then there's, at the end, there's a column that indicates witness availability issues regarding that topic. So it's to try to help us manage the multiple topics and many witnesses that we have in the hearing. Is there some other specific thing you'd like me to address?
No, I just wanted to draw their attention to it and see if they had questions about it. Board members, as you imagine, there may well be adjustments made to it as we move along, and witnesses have scheduling and conflicts. But it represents a lot of work and on Ms. Katz's part, and a lot of discussion among all of the parties with her. Do any of the board members have questions about it? Board member Davis.
Thank you. First, I would like to say, Ms. Katz, this is awesome. You did a wonderful job on it. It helps keep us in order, so thank you very much. Actually, my only question on it was about the topic order, since that column is blank. Do we just assume that we're moving top to bottom here, or is that something that's going to populate?
Yes, Member Trujillo Davis. I'm wondering if, I'm not quite sure, maybe if you are all the way over on the, if you scroll all the way to the left, there are numbers associated with each row of the topics. And so you might not have the latest version, so I am happy to send it to Ms. Orth and Ms. Jones. Maybe that needs to be sent out again. But yes, you are correct, though, generally, that is the order. that it's going in that order, although it kind of got tweaked a little bit this weekend. So I don't know, Madam Hearing Officer, have they been provided with the more recent one? Okay.
Yes.
Oh,
So
okay, I must just have
actually,
the wrong one up.
yeah, Member Bitzer was just asking in the chat who had sent it and whether we have the most recent version to the board members. I believe Pam did send the most recent version to the board members, but I'll ask Pam to resend it because I know that everyone involved has been just slammed with emails, especially because I was forced to send each of you 10 invitations, and I really am sorry about that. There was no way around it. So Pam, if you would please resend the most recent version.
And it will say, you know, it has the whole name, and at the end it should say V2 because some of the topics moved. So that would be the one, Pam, for you to send.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you for that. Other board member questions of Ms. Katz about the spreadsheet? No, okay. So then, Ms. Katz, would you please just briefly speak to us then about the next couple of topics, if you would please, and the witnesses who'll be addressing them.
Sure, thanks. So the first topic is ozone formation, and that's going to be Dr. Angela Rasso. The second will be ozone monitoring, and that will be covered by two witnesses, Andrew R. and Brent Ellington. And then the third topic is stakeholder outreach, which is Ms. Keene. Now these are, I expect we should get through these fairly easily, and that today for sure. And they don't have, I don't believe that there was any rebuttal testimony submitted to those. And so I would ask to put on all of those witnesses, see where we are, because I actually do not have my modeling expert here. And so I think we're going to, and we had asked to have the modeling testimony start tomorrow morning. And so then there's certain topics that could move up if we have time after these witnesses.
Right. Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, I think I said this to the lawyers, my highest priority is packing as much as we can into the hours we have. All right, so now let's see, I do now have a chat message from Ms. DeVore that the National Park Service is prepared to give their presentation regarding ozone formation and monitoring this afternoon as rebuttal if it fits.
Oh, my mistake. I'm sorry. That Ms. DeVore is right. I neglected it. They do have a rebuttal witness on ozone formation.
Yeah, Mr. Vimont, I believe. All right. So if you would please, Ms. Katz, if there's nothing else we need to discuss, call your first witness.
Thank you, Madam Hearing Officer. Did you want to do exhibit admissions at this time?
You know what? I did kind of blow past that, didn't I? All right. So, Rat, I was looking forward to testimony.
Too.
So, the thing about the exhibits is that most of the parties have no objection to most of the exhibits. We do have a couple of parties who have objections to several of the exhibits. So I can certainly bring Mr. Rose back on. He seemed to perhaps have some strategy in mind for the discussion. We can do that. Or I can ask you to offer the exhibits to which no one objected. We'll just admit those en masse, and we can wait until you actually offer the ones that were subject to an objection before we have that discussion. What's your preference?
Thank you, Madam Hearing Officer. I actually don't have those specific exhibits that he's objected to of mine identified in the oral testimony. So they would be coming in through admission of my witness's pre-file testimony. I do not think that any of the exhibits that were associated with the next three witnesses, three witnesses on the first two topics are covered, but I do think he is objecting to some of the exhibits associated that are coming in through Ms. Keene's stakeholder outreach testimony. So I don't really know. I mean, I can just say I would move to admit all the exhibits that do not have objections at this time.
Okay. So the enemy D exhibits, Namoga, I did not see had any objections to the enemy D exhibits.
That's correct.
A&M objected to exhibits 5, 8, 9, 10, 32, 65, 72, 92, 110, and then the rebuttal exhibit 1. And you're right, that is about stakeholder outreach.
Yeah, I think they objected to every exhibit that had the word methane in it. So
okay,
I think that's how that went.
All right. So please give me the numbers, if you will, of the ones other than the ones that are objecting, so we can put that clearly on the transcript so that they're being admitted.
So those would be NMED exhibits 1 through 110, excluding the ones identified by Ms. Orth, and NMED rebuttal exhibits 1 through 23.
Okay, so I'm going to do it this way so that the transcript is clear. I know it's a little more tedious. So 1 through 4, NMED exhibits 1 through 4, 6 and 7, 11 through 31, 33 to 64, 66 to 71, 73 to 91, 93 to 109, and 111 to, did you say 123? Yes, Ms. Katz?
Sorry, no, Madam Hearing Officer. We actually marked our rebuttal exhibits starting again at through 1. So
no, I'm sorry. After 110, is it 120?
No, it's NMED rebuttal exhibit 1.
No, I'm sorry. After 110, I thought there were still more after 110.
There were, but they are our rebuttal exhibits. So they start at 1 again.
Okay, so there's nothing after 110.
Right.
In the direct.
Correct.
Okay. So I'm sorry. Teresa, I just botched that. So 93 to 110 is what I should have said. All right. So now it's the rebuttal exhibits 2 through 23. Right?
1 through 23. I believe. Or did he object to a rebuttal?
One has been objected to. So 2 through 20.
That's the entire testimony of, rule testimony of Ms. Keene and Mr. Palmer. So I guess we can take that up. And that's on the rule, so that's not up. That's a different one that's than Ms. Keene's testimony that's coming up today.
Okay, but what I'm trying to do is admit the ones to which there was no objection. So
I hear that. Thank you.
Rebuttal exhibits 2 through 23, right?
Madam Hearing Officer, let me further confuse this. So just to make sure, we did have some conversations with the department after we noted our objections, and Ms. Katz was correct. We identified exhibits that related to methane. As we understand the department's testimony, we have no objection to those exhibits. So the others we still have with the other parties, but as to the department's exhibits that we identified, we're withdrawing our objection.
I'm really sorry I didn't invite you up a little earlier there, Mr. Rose.
I wasn't sure whether to try to inject or not, but if we're going down this road particularly far, I figured we ought to talk about that.
Right. No, anytime you can rescue me from going through something like that when you've withdrawn the objection, that would be good. So all of NMED's exhibits are admitted because, as I understand it, no other party objects to them. Mr. Rose's objections were the only objections made, and they've been withdrawn. So NMED exhibits, the direct exhibits 1 through 110 are admitted, and the rebuttal exhibits 1 through 23 are admitted. Okay, I think we've cleared that up on the record now. Oh, I see Mr. Bach.
Yeah, Madam Hearing Officer, this is David Bach with Clean Air Advocates. I hate to interrupt, but I think it would be really helpful for the other parties to which this extremely broad objection has been lodged to have this heard earlier rather than later. As you can probably imagine, with 47 exhibits being objected to and large sections of testimony, makes it a little difficult for us to plan our presentation if we don't know how that objection might be ruled on.
I'm sorry. So, do you mean the IPA&M objections?
Yes, that's correct. And maybe, I mean, maybe we could address it first thing tomorrow or something, but I think it'd just be helpful, like I said, to have it kind of scheduled maybe before we get to the particular people that might be objected to, because I know it applies to 3 or 4 parties.
All right. Thank you. Let me think about that.
Madam Hearing Officer, I mean, I think there's maybe a little bit of difference as they apply. I know for the department, you know, we haven't really, we've said very little about methane, and the exhibits that mention methane are really just associated. They're not being used to propose specific requirements or targeted at methane. So that's, I mean, that was the basis of my response to Mr. Rose. And so.
As you can imagine, my timing on the exhibits, once I understood that IPA&M objected to a couple dozen exhibits, it didn't make, it made sense to me that I would have this discussion with Ms. Katz, such that in the event the objection had not been withdrawn, she could have laid a foundation and made her proffer while she had her witness on the screen. But that's all I was thinking about in terms of timing, Mr. Bach. All right, let's get back, having admitted all of NMED's exhibits, let's get back to your witnesses. I'm excited. And I believe you were calling Angela Rasso? Rasso, thank you. Dr. Rasso, if you would please spell your last name.
My last name is spelled R-A-S-O.
Thank you. And if you would raise your right hand, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
I do.
Thank you very much. Ms. Katz, your 30 minutes with Ms. Rasso Dr. Rasso starts now.
Thank you, Madam Hearing Officer. And I will say that I apologize for my reference to Dr. Rasso in the opening statement. As Ms. Rasso, she is Dr. Rasso, and I will want to correct that for the record. Dr. Rasso, where are you employed?
I work at the Air Quality Bureau of the New Mexico Environment Department.
And how long have you worked for NMED?
Approximately 3 years.
And what is your current job title?
I'm an air dispersion modeler in the Bureau's planning section.
And what are your job duties?
I review dispersion modeling submitted with permit applications to verify that air quality standards will not be violated by proposed facilities. I also help review and understand photochemical modeling results for regional level projects.
And can you please describe your educational and professional qualifications?
I hold a bachelor's degree in chemistry from Whitman College. I also hold a PhD in chemistry from Purdue University. During my PhD research, I studied ozone chemistry and interactions.
Thank you. And a copy of your resume has been provided as NMED Exhibit 14, correct?
Yes.
And have you submitted written direct testimony in this proceeding?
I have.
And your full written direct testimony appears as Exhibit 13, correct?
Yes.
And do you have any changes to your written testimony?
No.
And do you adopt that testimony here today?
I do.
All right, Dr. Rasso, can you please describe how ozone is formed in the atmosphere?
Ozone is not directly emitted into the atmosphere, rather ozone is what's known as a secondary pollutant. This means it's produced by photochemical reactions of precursor gases in the atmosphere. In the case of ozone, the precursor gases are oxides of nitrogen, which we'll be referring to as NOx, and volatile organic compounds known as VOCs.
And where do these precursor emissions generally come from?
NOx is predominantly produced by human activities, most often combustion, burning of fossil fuels. Most VOCs come from biological life, plants, but in some areas, human activities can produce similar amounts of VOCs as plant life. Anthropogenic sources of VOCs include fossil fuel production and distribution and biomass burning. In New Mexico, about 20% of total VOC emissions are from the oil and gas industry. The industry is the largest source of anthropogenic VOCs in New Mexico.
And is it easy to predict ozone concentrations?
No, it's actually quite difficult. The chemical reactions that form ozone are very complex. It isn't as simple as assuming that one molecule of VOC plus one molecule of NOx will produce one ozone molecule. The oxidation of one molecule of VOCs typically produces two or more ozone molecules, and the reactions that create ozone don't actually destroy NOx in the atmosphere. Additionally, there are many other competing reactions that are occurring in the atmosphere at the same time. This is why photochemical modeling is so necessary to understand the complexities and predict ozone concentrations in a region. Photochemical models contain hundreds of chemical reactions in addition to physical reactions and transportation of gases.
Can regulations reduce ozone concentrations, Dr. Rasso?
Yes, the data has been very clear over the last several decades that regulations can reduce ozone concentrations.
And did you review the work products produced by Ramble during their photochemical modeling for this rule?
Yes, Ramble conducted the photochemical modeling. As they were producing work products, I reviewed both draft and final work products. A list of the work products that we reviewed is included in my written testimony.
Thank you, Dr. Rasso, and I have no further questions for this witness.
Thank you very much. I will ask in the order of the service list again for questions by council. After I've done that, I will invite questions from board members and anyone else. If you are not a panelist and you know that you have a question for this witness, please let me know in the chat. So Ms. Fox, do you have a question of Dr. Rasso?
No, Madam Hearing Officer, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Paranos? She may have stepped away. Mr. James? He may have stepped away. Ms. DeVore or Mr. DeMont?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just saw something in chat from Professor Pasiniak that CCP and NAVA do not have questions. Wild Earth Guardians, Mr. Nikeel?
No questions, Madam Hearing Officer.
All right, thank you. Oh, and Ms. Paranos has just texted that she had no questions. Mr. DeSalen?
No questions. Thank you, Madam Hearing Officer.
Thank you. Mr. Rose?
No questions.
Thank you. Mr. Jano?
No questions, Madam Hearing Officer.
Thank you. Mr. Boutier?
No questions, Madam Hearing Officer.
Thank you. Ms. Gutierrez?
No questions, Madam Hearing Officer.
Thank you. Mr. Newman?
No questions, Madam Hearing Officer. Thanks.
Thank you. Let's see, oh, Ms. Witherspoon? She may have stepped away. All right, let me turn to the
Madam Hearing Officer, Namoga has no questions either.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry. Oh, yes, that's right. Very sorry. Was that Mr. Heiser?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, let me turn to the board members. Madam Chair, do you have questions of this witness?
I don't have any questions.
All right, thank you. Vice Chair Davis, any questions? No?
No, ma'am.
All right, Member Katz? You may have stepped away. Member Bitzer?
No questions.
Thank you. Member Duval?
Yes, I have just a brief question. Thank you, Dr. Rasso. I was curious if, in part of your capacity in evaluating models, do you also do you do process modeling yourself in your position?
The Bureau does not process photochemical models ourselves. We do process dispersion models, which don't account for chemistry and can't predict ozone concentrations.
Okay. I was just, point of clarification, I was curious. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you. Member Garcia, do you have questions?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. And Member Honker? I'm sorry, Mr. Honker, did you say no questions? Oops. Oh, there you are.
No questions.
All right, thank you. I think, and I see no questions from any non-panelists in the chat. So is there any reason not to excuse Dr. Rasso? Going once? All right, thank you very much, Dr. Rasso, for your testimony. Ms. Katz, do we then hear from Mr. Vimont? Is that what we do?
Yes, I believe that's correct.
Okay, I'm working my way across the spreadsheet there, and that was how I thought we were going to walk through it. Mr. Vimont?
Yes, if you.
Madam Hearing Officer, I'm sorry, really quick. I don't think that the spreadsheet's set up in the order that we're doing the anyway, sorry, yes. I mean, he's the only other witness for this one, so it doesn't really matter.
All right, thank you. Mr. Rymont, have you joined? Oh, this is Ms. DeVore. I see you, Ms. DeVore.
Can I
Well,
introduce Mr. Vimont quickly?
well, please wait a second here. It might make more sense to go after the monitoring discussion, since we kind of cover both in our rebuttal, and frankly, they're interrelated. So
How do you want to do that?
All right. Thank you.
it's at your pleasure, however you would like to do it.
Okay. So if you'd like to move on, Ms. Katz, let's do that.
Thank you, Madam Hearing Officer. The department calls Brent Ellington.
All right. Let's see. Do we have them on screen? There we are. Mr. Ellington, I can see you. Would you raise your right hand, please? And do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
I do.
Thank you. And let's spell your last name, please.
It's Ellington, Ellington.
Thank you very much. Ms. Katz, your 30 minutes starts now.
Thank you, Madam Hearing Officer. Mr. Ellington, can you tell the board where you are employed?
The Air Quality Bureau of the New Mexico Environment Department.
And how long have you worked for the department?
Approximately 7 years.
And what is your current job title?
I'm an environmental scientist specialist supervisor for the Air Quality Bureau.
Can you describe your job duties?
I supervise the Bureau's northern New Mexico operations staff with respect to air quality monitoring and data under federal regulatory requirements.
And can you please describe your educational and professional qualifications?
I hold a bachelor's degree of science in biology from Eastern New Mexico University. I've worked as an environmental scientist for over 17 years with the state of New Mexico, 7 of which have been with the Air Quality Bureau. My positions have included the environmental specialist operator in Southeast New Mexico, the Southern New Mexico supervisor of operations, and recently the Northern New Mexico supervisor for the ambient air quality monitoring section.
And a copy of your resume has been provided as NMED Exhibit 28.
Yes.
Have you submitted written direct testimony in this proceeding?
Yes.
And your full written direct testimony appears as NMED Exhibit 27?
Yes.
Do you have any changes to your written testimony?
No.
Do you adopt your written testimony here today?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Ellington, can you please summarize for the board your direct testimony regarding the department's air quality monitoring network?
Yes, the department's responsible for collecting ambient air data to document present air quality and significant trends in pollution concentrations. This data must be of high quality because its use may have significant health, social, and economic impacts. The NMED Ambient Air Quality Monitoring Network consists of state and local monitoring stations and special purpose monitors. The purpose of the network is to support the national ambient air quality standards, and the Bureau is designated by the EPA to operate the monitors. This existing NMED air monitoring network includes monitors in the areas of highest population density and includes sites that measure general background concentrations. There are currently 14 ozone analyzers deployed at various monitoring stations throughout New Mexico.
Thank you. Can you discuss the federal regulations governing the department's air monitoring network?
Yeah, the EPA specifies the general monitoring site types and its regulations. The locations of the monitors in New Mexico meet the requirements in those federal regulations. The Bureau maintains the air monitoring instruments to 95% probability goals for accuracy and precision within EPA's required limits.
And what are the air pollutants that are required to be monitored?
Currently, the department monitors sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, ozone, particulate matter, PM10 and 2.5 micrometers in size in areas of New Mexico where the respective pollutants are expected to occur at significant levels. such as in or near cities, near coal-fired plants, power plants, mining operations, oil and gas operations, and petroleum refineries.
And can you describe the ozone monitoring conducted by the department?
Yeah, the department collects ozone data at each of the 14 monitoring sites in the state and uploads that data to the EPA's Air Now program every hour. The air pollution data are also available on the Bureau's website. Information on this site includes pollutant concentrations, values, and are color-coded in the Ambient Air Quality Index, so the public can better understand that. That represents the current ambient air quality for each monitoring location.
And what equipment does the department use to monitor ozone pollution, and how are ambient ozone levels monitored?
Yeah, the Bureau currently uses the Thermo Fisher Model 49i ultraviolet photometric ozone analyzer. We just call it the 49i to monitor ozone. This equipment is approved by the EPA for measuring ambient concentrations of ozone pursuant to federal regulations. The Thermo analyzer calculates the ambient air concentration of ozone at a monitoring station by counting the molecules of ozone that are present as they pass by an ultraviolet lamp inside the analyzer over a defined period of time. And that calculated ozone concentration is then reported to the station data logger computer and is available thereafter on the Bureau's website for public review.
Can you please describe how the department complies with auditing and calibration requirements for this ozone monitoring equipment?
Yes, the in-station computer and calibration systems perform weekly calibration checks. The Bureau evaluates the results of these checks as part of the data validation process, and the results are reported to the EPA. The Bureau follows standard operating procedures for uniformity and uniform practices and quality control at each one of our ambient air monitoring stations.
Thank you, Mr. Ellington. I have no further questions for this witness.
Thank you, Ms. Katz. Going to go through the list again. Ms. Fox, do you have questions of Mr. Ellington?
No, thank you, Madam Hearing Officer.
Ms. Paranos? She may have frozen again. Professor Pasiniak or Mr. James?
No questions, Madam Hearing Officer.
Thank you. Ms. DeVore or Mr. Beaumont?
No questions, Madam Hearing Officer.
Okay. Mr. Nightkiel?
No questions, Madam Hearing Officer. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. DeSalen?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Heiser?
No questions, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rose?
I just have one question for clarification. And that is, are the monitors that you identified for ozone include monitors in Bernalillo County, or are those maintained by the city as opposed to the state?
Yes, those are maintained by the city of Albuquerque's monitoring network. That's out of our scope.
Do you know how many monitors they maintain?
You know, that I don't have readily available. I don't know how many stations they operate.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you. Mr. Jano?
No questions, Madam Hearing Officer.
All right, thank you. Mr. Boutier?
No questions on behalf of GCA.
Thank you. Ms. Gutierrez?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Newman?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Witherspoon, if you're with us. All right, I'm going to turn to the board now. In the event you are not a panelist, and you have a question for this witness, please reach out through the chat. Madam Chair, do you have questions of Mr. Ellington?
Madam Hearing Officer, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Trujillo Davis?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have one question for clarification. Mr. Ellington, how many air monitors are in Eddy County and how many air monitors are in Lee County?
Did you say, I got Eddy County, we have one monitor there.
In
And
Lee
then
County.
in Lee County, we have a station in Hobbs, New Mexico as well. So that one in each county.
And where are those located? And I don't need specifics. I was looking more for
Sure.
close to population, out in middle of county, kind of just general.
Yeah, in Eddy County, our station is on the western side of Carlsbad, kind of on the southwestern side, very close to populated areas. And in Hobbs, it is in a city well yard in the neighborhoods, close to an elementary school.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you for your testimony.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Member Cates, do you have questions of Mr. Ellington?
I do not, thank you.
All right, thank you. Member Bitzer? No?
Oh, sorry.
Thank
Slow on
you.
the button.
Thank you. Member Duval, I believe, had to step away. Member Garcia?
No,
No?
no question.
All right,
Okay.
thank you. And Member Honker?
No questions, thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there any reason not to excuse Mr. Ellington? No, thank you very much, Mr. Ellington.
You're very welcome, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Madam Hearing Officer, I can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was reading a message from Professor Pisiniak asking me to make a few of the law students panelists. I guess they weren't able to come in through the panelist link, so let me take just a moment to do that. So Mr. James and who else was it? Kiefer Johnson. All right. I'm sorry. I don't multitask as well as I think I do. Okay, make panelists. All right. Taking care of that little bit of business. So should we turn now at this point, Ms. Katz, to the rebuttal from Mr. Weimont and Ms. DeVore before you go to stakeholder information?
Madam Hearing Officer, I still have one other witness for the monitoring, and so I believe it would be appropriate to have Mr. Weimont go after that.
I'm very sorry. Thank you. Please call your next witness.
Thank you. The department calls Andrew R.
Mr. R, I see you on the screen. If you would raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
I do.
Thank you very much. And Andrew is the standard spelling. R, if you would spell it, please.
Okay, my last name is spelled A-H-R.
Thank you. And Ms. Katz, your 30 minutes starts now.
Thank you. Mr. R, where are you employed?
I'm employed at the Air Quality Bureau of the New Mexico Environment Department.
And how long have you worked for the department?
I've been with the department approximately 4 years.
And what is your current job title?
Currently, I'm the Quality Assurance Staff Manager.
And what are your job duties?
I manage the quality assurance auditors who perform audits of air monitoring equipment at all the air monitoring sites. I also manage the quality assurance data handling specialist who validates ambient air data, reports precision and accuracy data to EPA's air quality system, and performs data certification.
Thank you. And a copy of your resume has been provided as NMED Exhibit 31.
Yes.
And have you submitted written direct testimony in this proceeding?
Yes, I have.
And your full written direct testimony appears as Exhibit 30?
Yes.
Do you have any changes to your written testimony?
No,
And do you adopt your written testimony here today?
I do, yes.
Thank you. Mr. R, can you describe for the board what a design value is and how design values for ozone are determined?
Okay. A design value is a statistic that is used to determine the compliance status of a given location with respect to the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, or NAQS. Design values are typically used to designate and classify non-attainment areas, as well as to assess progress towards meeting the NAQS. Design values are computed and published annually by EPA's Office of Air Quality Planning and Standards and reviewed in conjunction with EPA's regional offices. The current NAQS for ozone is 0.070 ppm, or parts per million. Yet this ozone standard has been in effect since October 26, 2015. The NAQS is met at an ambient air monitoring site when the 3-year average of the 4th highest daily maximum 8-hour average ozone concentration, or the design value, is less than 0.070 parts per million. The 3-year average is computed using the 3 most recent consecutive years of ambient ozone monitoring data. Design values are also reported in parts per million to 3 decimal places. Federal regulations specify what is considered ozone season for each state. Ozone season for most states is generally considered to be from May through September. However, those are considered the warmest months of the year. However, New Mexico's ozone season is designated as all 12 months. Hourly average ozone concentrations are reported at each ozone monitor in parts per million to the 3rd decimal place, with digits to the right of the 3rd decimal place truncated. Daily maximum 8-hour average ozone concentrations are determined each day with ambient ozone monitoring data.
And can you discuss the quality assurance requirements for design value data?
Yes. Before daily 8-hour average ozone concentration data is submitted to the EPA, the data is reviewed by QA personnel at the Bureau to meet validity requirements. Ozone monitoring equipment must pass an annual accuracy audit to ensure that all flows, pressures, lamp intensities, temperatures, and instrument response to ozone concentrations are within specifications. Quarterly calibrations are performed on all ozone monitoring instruments by personnel from the Bureau's monitoring section. Ozone monitoring instruments must pass quality control checks, which are performed automatically. If any ozone monitors do not pass this weekly check, monitoring personnel make required adjustments or fixes to the failing instrument to bring it back within specifications. QA personnel verify that all ozone monitoring instruments pass this check and then submit the weekly data to EPA through the Air Quality System website. Daily checks are also performed by monitoring personnel to ensure ozone monitoring equipment is reporting and operating within specifications. They look for any equipment alarms and note any unusual or high value concentrations above 0.070 parts per million. The quality assurance data steward performs a daily check of ozone data each morning to ensure the instruments are reporting, takes note of any data abnormalities. Lastly, QA personnel perform annual data certification on all monitoring data. The Bureau then submits a certification letter and related reports to the EPA.
Thank you. Can you describe the process for submission of monitoring data to EPA for calculation of design values?
Yes. The Bureau's QA personnel review all data to ensure that it meets all validity requirements and submits it to the EPA on a quarterly basis. Once the hourly ozone data is submitted, EPA uses it to calculate the 8-hour average ozone concentration for each day to determine the 1st, second, third, fourth, and fourth highest daily maximum 8-hour ozone concentrations. This is for the entire year to produce the design value. EPA therefore determines the design value, not the Bureau.
Thank you, Mr. R. And I have no further questions for this witness.
Thank you very much. I will go through the list for questioning. Ms. Fox?
No questions, Madam Hearing Officer.
Thank you. Ms. Paranos? Professor Pasiniak? Oh, I saw you briefly.
No questions, Madam Hearing Officer.
All right, thank you. Ms. DeVore or Mr. Bymont?
Questions, thank you.
All right, Mr. Nykiel?
No questions, thank you.
All right, Mr. DeSalen?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Paranos is unable to unmute herself at the moment, but she has no questions. Mr. Heiser?
Thank you, Madam Hearing Officer. I do have a question or two. Mr. R, you said that the department itself does not calculate the design value, but EPA does. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And has EPA calculated a design value for Chavez County or not?
I do not believe so.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rose?
No further questions, Hearing Officer.
Oh, thank you. Mr. Rose, do you have questions of Mr. R?
I have no questions of this witness.
All right. Mr. Jano?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Boutier?
No questions on behalf of GCA.
Thank you. Ms. Gutierrez?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Newman?
No questions, thank you.
All right. And Ms. Witherspoon, if you're with us? No. I'm going to turn to the board now. If you are not a panelist and you have a question of this witness, please reach out through the chat. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Officer, Hearing Officer. I do have one question to follow up from Mr. Heiser's line of questioning. So as you responded to Mr. Heiser, you don't have a value for Chavez County. Just so I can clarify in my mind, is that, so therefore only the values are calculated for the monitoring stations and those locations where the county, where the monitoring station is within the county? Is that correct?
How I understand it, yes.
Okay, so those follow-up question, Hearing Officer, if I may, so those counties without a monitoring station don't have those design values or the comparison to the design values calculated. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Vice Chair Trujillo Davis.
Madam Hearing Officer, I only have a couple of follow-up questions. So when you submit 3 years of data to the EPA for your design value, how long does that take to receive a design value back from the EPA?
We don't submit 3 years at a single time. As I stated, we submit the data quarterly each year.
Oh.
And so, and then we certify all that data once a year too. But EPA, I mean, they have all that data. They can come up with the design value for the year after it's been, say, after it's been certified. Certifications are done at the end of May, and that's when we certify the previous year's data. The required date is by May 30th of the following year. So I would imagine that EPA would probably have that data after they receive our certification for it.
So as we move through this hearing and we're looking at data for these counties, what's the time frame we're actually looking at? Are we looking at 2020, 1918, or are we looking further back into those years?
I mean, the current design value?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, the current design value is based on 2018, 2019, and 2020. Those are the latest design values.
Okay, and do you request from EPA which counties you want to have design values for?
No, because it's dependent upon where we have air monitors, ozone air monitors for that. So EPA, say they calculate what the design values are, and then they assign those to the specific county or our monitoring site.
Okay, thank you. And I'm just trying to get a picture of how those interactions between EPA and NMED work. So thank you for taking the time to answer my questions.
Welcome.
Member Trujillo Davis, I think maybe you will also, with witness Mike Baca, will also be addressing some of that information. So you can also ask him about that as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you both. Member Cates, do you have questions of Mr. R?
I do not. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Member Bitzer, do you have questions of Mr. R?
Mr. R, just one question. You mentioned that the equipment you use is subject to an annual check, accuracy, verification type of deal. How often is it spot on, and are there occasions when it's substantially off at the time of?
Oh, it has to meet, it has to fall within a specific range of specifications. It can't, if it's off at all, then it doesn't pass the annual audit. Then the monitoring personnel, AQB, go in and make the adjustments, calibrations to the tool. The QA auditors do not fix the tool. That's up to the monitoring people to bring it back within specification. Once it's back within the specifications, according to the monitoring people, then we'll reperform the audit to make sure that it is passing.
So they do have to be recalibrated fairly often? Is that what I'm hearing?
No, I wouldn't say so. I mean, most of the time they do pass their audit because.
And I mean, you said it has to be on. Is that 1%, 2%? How plus or minus could it be and still pass?
I don't have that in front of me right now. I wish I could get that to you. I don't know that number right off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
No rush. We're going to be here for a couple of weeks.
Okay. Yeah, because we do have, it's specified on, we do have a document that has all that written on there that says, yes, it has to be within these specifications in order to pass.
And we can provide that information.
Yeah, we can submit that. I just don't
Yeah,
have
I'm
that.
just curious as to what constitutes good data and what the deviation is likely to be. That's good. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Member Garcia, do you have questions of Mr. R?
Yes, I do have one question. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine.
Okay. So who decides where the monitor is located? Is that something that NMED proposes and EPA approves?
That's really beyond my scope. I mean, how that's done. I think that the EPA, pretty much, proposes where they go.
Okay. Perhaps somebody else can answer that a little later. That'll be fine. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Member Hunker, do you have questions of Mr. R?
No questions at this time. Thank you.
All right, thank you. No one else has reached out through chat. Ms. Katz, did you have any redirect, or can we excuse Mr. R?
We can excuse Mr. R. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. R, for your testimony. Is it time now to turn to Mr. Vimont and Ms. DeVore? All right. Ms. DeVore, I see you on the screen, and I believe you said you wanted to introduce Mr. Vimont. What I'd like to do is swear both of you in. If you would, each of you raise your right hands. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. That was both Ms. DeVore, her first name Lisa, last name Devore, and Mr. Vimont, Vimont. Go ahead, Ms. DeVore.
Okay. So I'd like to introduce Mr. Vimont with the National Park Service. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Atmospheric Sciences and as well as a Master's of Science in Atmospheric Science. And he has worked for the Park Service since 1991. And before that, held positions with the Environmental Protection Agency and the State of New Mexico Air Quality Bureau. And he is currently the acting chief for the National Air Resources Division for the National Park Service, and has also served in roles as meteorologist and is the chief of the Research and Monitoring Branch of the Air Resources Division of the Park Service. And his curriculum vitae was submitted as National Park Service's Exhibit A in our rebuttal testimony. And he will be providing a presentation today focusing on ozone formation and monitoring with emphasis on a study that the National Park Service did in Carlsbad Caverns. Thank you.
Is it possible to share my screen? I have a PowerPoint presentation.
Yes, I will make you a presenter. Just give me a moment. And remember,
Okay.
you have 30 minutes.
Yep.
And let's see here. Change role, make presenter. All right, it should be coming up for you.
Okay, now the next trick is to figure out which window it's going to want to share here. But these are always tricky when we get into the presentation things here on a webinar. But let me share. Okay. Let me try sharing screen 2. And then I will go to presentation mode, which I hope. And did that. Well, interesting. Let's try that.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, you have that. Let me, what happens if I do this? Are you seeing the one with the slides on the side, or are you seeing the presentation mode?
It was better earlier because now we see something that is split.
Okay. Let me get out of this. We can do it either way. All right. Apologies there. Okay, so you see it okay now?
Yes, I see one large screen and then the one large slide, and then little thumbnails of the slides along the left margin, which aren't distracting. Please go ahead.
Yeah, let's just do that. Get the point across in any case. With the National Park Service, we're offering technical comments on the proposed rule. Give a quick synopsis of our results that we want to present. First of all, ozone concentrations exceed the level of the National Ambient Air Quality Standards for ozone at Carlsbad Caverns National Park in New Mexico. We'll go over our monitoring here in a minute, but basically our monitoring at Carlsbad Caverns follows the EPA guidelines that were outlined by the previous presenters for the state. It's certified data just like the state data is. Volatile organic, volatile organic compounds measured at Carlsbad Caverns National Park indicate that the main sources of volatile organic compounds affecting ozone formation are from oil and gas activities. Nitrogen oxide emissions that affect high ozone concentrations at Carlsbad Caverns National Park are from localized sources, meaning somewhere in the vicinity of Eddy County or that kind of a scale, not from long distance transport. The measures proposed in this rule will help reduce high ozone concentrations. We will talk about this more as a rebuttal later on. And based on the data that we have, we think that the NOx and VOC control measures are necessary to reduce ozone. Okay. Shoop, there we go. First, go over some of the general information about air quality in national parks. There's a variety of laws out there that we operate under to protect air resources in national parks and wilderness areas. National Park Service relies on states and the EPA to implement air quality regulations that can protect park resources. We do not have regulatory authority, but we do have authority to measure what's happening in our national parks. Actually, I should say your national parks. It's all of our national parks. The ground level ozone formation, one of the previous speakers discussed this. It's formed from a complex of reactions of nitrogen oxides and VOCs in the presence of sunlight. It's a little cartoon to kind of illustrate that. Can impact vegetation and human health. You can see here some of the chlorotic model that we see on leaves that can happen from high ozone concentrations. And it's a EPA regulated pollutant, and that's why we're all here. You know, we're focusing today on our VOCs and NOx. The other aspect of this is we have visitors that come and they exercise in the park. We have staff that's out working outside, and ozone can affect the health of the visitors and our staff. So we are concerned about that. The sources of ozone, the schematic illustrates that air pollutants are transported into parks, generally not formed in the park, or the sources are not in the parks, but it comes to the park from outside sources, and it affects our staff and visitors, as I said before. We have extensive oil and gas activities throughout the Midwest and the West. There's been certainly an increase in oil and gas development in many areas of the country, and including the areas that are going to be affected by this proposed rule. Several parks that we are in New Mexico are located, and affected by this. Carlsbad Caverns National Park, Guadalupe Mountains National Park in Texas, Chaco Cultural National Historical Park, and Mesa Verde National Park in Colorado. Most of the data presented here today are focused on studies of Carlsbad Caverns. We do also have ozone monitors at Chaco Culture and at Mesa Verde. The managers of Carlsbad Caverns National Park have been concerned about the development there and asked us to put in some monitoring down there several years ago. As we monitor there, we've, like I said, the ozone monitoring we have meets the EPA criteria that was described earlier. And these are the design concentrations down in here for the various years. As we get back into here, the particular monitor we had was not being operated that way, but in recent years, it has been operated according to EPA specs. The other aspect, looking at this, you look at trends in nitrogen oxides from satellite data, lots of it's going down, particularly in the urban areas. We see that, but areas such as the Permian Basin down here, you can see this little pink box down in here is showing increases in NOx over this time period. Given that, we have did some special studies down there in 2017 and 2019. In 2017, we did a kind of a survey study around a number of parks in the western United States. And from that, Carlsbad Caverns showed up as having very unique signatures of volatile organic compounds. Talked about how ozone formation takes place from reactions of VOCs and NOx in the presence of sunlight. The different VOCs have varying reactivities, and in turn, they affect ozone formation to varying degrees. The different types of VOCs and the mix of VOCs also provide unique markers for identifying sources, and the types and the emissions, emission origins. In the remainder of this presentation, we'll show that the markers indicating a dominance of oil and gas sources are found in Carlsbad Caverns National Park. During the studies, we've been able to identify more than 70 different VOCs through our monitoring efforts. We did the survey study in April to September 2017, where we took grab samples, which you can see in the picture here on the side, where at times they were evacuated canisters that are inert to allow us to sample. The studies were done at 4 national parks, and they periodically have measured high ozone. And so we wanted to determine the mix of VOCs that we were seeing in these areas. And they're disparate across the country, or across the West at least. Carlsbad Caverns is one, Great Basin National Park, Grand Canyon National Park, and Joshua Tree National Park. Each has their own unique source regions, but we wanted to see what the differences were between. Average VOC concentrations here are of different types of sources. Alkanes are related to oil and gas and transportation. The alkenes, ag and transportation. Ethine is a combustion product. Biogenics are measured here, natural emissions, and aromatics from urban and oil and gas operations. We use park abbreviations here. CAVE is Carlsbad Caverns, Great Basin is, or GRBA is Great Basin, GRCA is Grand Canyon, and Joshua Tree is JOTR. Romo is also on here. It was a separate study just for comparison, which is Rocky Mountain National Park. But you notice the total VOCs, and especially the alkanes associated with oil and gas, are up to 5 to 10 times higher at Carlsbad Caverns than they are at the other parks. So there's extensive oil and gas development in the areas east of Carlsbad Caverns. It raises the question, okay, where does the air come from during periods of high ozone? Using back trajectory analysis, during the 2017 study, we found that the high ozone corresponds to airflow from the east and the southeast towards Carlsbad Caverns National Park. The warm colors are more likely to be coming from these areas during the high concentrations. The cool colors are less likely to come from these areas. So you can kind of see that this area where previously we showed high NOx emissions in the satellite data, same area here where we're seeing high ozone correlating with that transport direction. When based on the 2017 study, we conducted another study in 2019. And it showed in the picture earlier, the 2017 study used evacuated fleet sampling containers, which we also had some of those during this study. But we had many specialized research grade instruments where we could get high time resolution measurements of the VOCs and nitrogen compounds that affect ozone formation. Carlsbad Caverns National Park, we have some objectives, which to figure out what the primary VOC drivers are of regional ozone formation. What is the nitrogen budget that's that helps produce ozone, and what are the species of the various compounds that contribute to or limit the aerosol formation, which we're not talking about here, but if the Park Service were also interested in that, that was one of the objectives. And it was also shown in the following slides, oil and gas emissions are driving the formation of ozone at Carlsbad Caverns. Okay, how do these VOCs and NOx interact? Next slide is going to show average concentrations of ozone, NO, and VOCs during the 2019 study. Each figure shows the average ozone and the sunlight intensity for each hour of the day. And the three charts show the diurnal daily patterns of different compound classes. So how the NO, which is unreacted NOx, think of it that way, most of it comes out of a combustion source, a tailpipe or a smoke, a stack like a compressor station, comes out as NO. And then reacts into NO2 and keeps going. Ethane is one of the most abundantly emitted VOCs, builds up and is reacted away then. And then the formation of alkyl nitrates is one of the classes of VOCs that's formed through this set of reactions in the atmosphere. It has a similar pattern to ozone, as you see. So these three charts show the average concentration of NO, VOCs, ethane, and 2-butyl nitrate, and ozone throughout the day. Concentrations are plotted along with this daily solar insolation. It's an idealized solar insolation plot because, oops, sorry about that. You can see that the ozone peaks in the later afternoons, typical ozone production. There's a spike in fresh NOx emissions in the morning that tapers off as it reacts during the daylight hours. Similarly, there's more ethane peaking in the morning that subsequently reacts in the ozone forming process, so it diminishes later on in the day. The 2-butyl nitrate, which is a reaction product, peaks around the time of the ozone peak, indicating that reactions of the ozone forming pollutants occurred during that day and that ozone wasn't transported to the area from afar. 2017 and 2019 studies both showed similar results at Carlsbad. Maybe the slide's a little confusing. We have the 2017 chart here and then some average values from 2019. Ethane is a distinctive indicator of emissions from oil and gas operations. It can be seen in the Carlsbad Caverns. During the 2017 study stands out from the other parks that we studied. In most areas, when ethane is measured in the background, you'd expect around 1 ppb by volume. In 2019, the average for the 6-week study was just over 70 ppb, excuse me. And some hourly values exceed 100. So definitely Carlsbad stands out from other areas that we've studied. Oil and gas emission tracers, something called the I to N pentane ratio. Fresh gasoline emissions typically have a ratio of 1.5 to 3. Fuel evaporation runs around 1.8 to 4. Vehicular exhaust, 2.2 to 3.8. As you can see in both 2017 and 2019, the I to N pentane ratio is less than 1, indicating oil and gas again. It's consistent between these 2 years. And the reason why 2019 are higher is because they cover all hours of the day, whereas we're only sampling in the afternoon in 2017. So again, another indication between the ethane, I to N pentane ratio that we're seeing an oil and gas signature contributing to ozone formation at Carlsbad Caverns National Park. This chart shows that there's fresh buildup of NOx at night, which is then processed through the VOC NOx sunlight reactions to form ozone. The NOx is generated in the vicinity. NOx from the farther away would have a much lower NOx to NOI. NOI is all different compounds. And NOx is usually defined as NO plus NO2, whereas NOI is NO plus NO2 and everything else, nitric acid, different, lots of different compounds. So it's really the total of all the reactants. So NOx from farther away would have a lower NOx to NOI ratio that we have in this chart. At night. While this slide showing a particular multi-day event, it is important to note that the same NOx to NOI ratio is persistent throughout the entire study period, indicating fresh NOx emissions. So it's not coming from very far distances away. Air mass aging. Alkyl nitrates are a product of the during the VOC NOx reactions that form ozone. The ratios of alkyl nitrates to their parent compounds can give us a good estimate of how long the air pollutants have been reacting when they reach the park. This graph shows that the vast majority of the reaction times are below 12 hours. This clearly shows the ozone-forming NOx and VOCs are nearby. The fact that the points fall off the idealized model, it's very idealized, implies that the model doesn't capture everything that is occurring. But the majority of things are happening in the fairly quickly. At this point, I'm going to deviate from here. I think the ozone concentrations at Carlsbad Caverns National Park, they frequently exceed the National Ambient Air Quality Standard for ozone. The information presented highlights the need for both NOx and VOC reductions and supports the proposed engine and turbine standards. The rest of this part of the slide will be discussed later when you're talking about the actual elements of the rule. Let's see, this is also on that. So our summary again, ozone concentrations exceed the level of the National Ambient Air Quality Standards for ozone at Carlsbad Caverns National Park. These are done with regulatory monitors following the EPA requirements for operation and quality assurance. The NPS has studied ozone formation in a number of parks. Carlsbad Caverns National Park stands out as being the most affected by oil and gas sources. 2 studies have been done at Carlsbad in 2017 and 2019, and during these times when peak ozone concentrations are measured there. The 2 studies show consistent results. The volatile organic compounds measured at Carlsbad indicate that the main sources of VOCs affecting ozone formation are from the oil and gas activities. Nitrogen oxide emissions that affect high ozone concentrations at Carlsbad National Park are from nearby sources. The measures proposed in the rule will help reduce the high ozone, and NOx and VOC control measures are necessary to reduce ozone at the park and really in the region in general. That's my presentation, and thank you for your listening.
Thank you, Mr. Beaumont. Let me ask about exhibits. Ms. DeVore mentioned Exhibit A, and I'm wondering, I didn't see objections from either NMOGA or APA and IPA and M to any of your exhibits, or anyone else to any of your exhibits. I'm wondering if you just want to offer all of your exhibits right now.
Yes. Yes. We have exhibits A through E.
A through E. Unless someone has changed their mind and reaches out right now, I'm going to admit exhibits A through E for the National Park Service. No? Thank you very much. National Park Service exhibits A through E are admitted. Ms. Katz, do you have questions of Mr. Beaumont?
I do not, Madam Hearing Officer.
Thank you. Ms. Fox?
No, Madam Hearing Officer.
Thank you. Ms. Perino?
No questions, Madam Hearing Officer.
Thank you. Professor Pisciniak?
No questions, Madam Hearing Officer.
Thank you. Let's see, Mr. Nykiel?
No questions, Madam Hearing Officer. Thank you.
All right, Mr. DeSalen?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Heiser?
Madam Hearing Officer, yes, I will have just a few questions for Mr. Beaumont. Thank you.
All right, go ahead.
So, Mr. Vimont, in your testimony, you testified that you looked at ethane and at one point you characterized it as a volatile organic compound. Are you testifying here today that you believe that ethane is a significant contributor to ozone formation, or are you using that as a tracer to identify putative impacts from oil and gas sources?
Definitely as a tracer. If Dr. Sive is on he should be here, one of our other witnesses. He may be able to better answer about the reactivity of ethane. I know it's less, it contributes, but to what degree? If he can get unmuted, I'm not sure.
So let me see.
Berkeley Sive.
I'm Mr. Heiser, did you say something? Oh, there you are.
Madam Hearing Officer, obviously Mr. Sy is not listed as a witness.
Right. I think
he is listed as a witness for the Park Service in our exhibit.
My mistake.
Okay. So I'm going to see if he is among the attendees. I think he is because he just reached out to chat. Hold on one second while I make him a panelist. Mr. Sive, if you would join us on screen, please. Mr. Vimont, should we take down your slide?
Yes, and we can bring them back up if we need to here. Let me see if I can unrelease them here.
All right. Mr. Sive, are you with us?
Yes, I am. To answer the question.
Hold on one second. First, we need you to spell your first and last name.
First name is Barkley, Barkley. Last name is Sive, Sive.
Okay, and if you would please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
I do.
Thank you very much. Please go ahead and answer the question, and thank you for your help.
Sure. It's primarily a tracer, but in this case too, the reactivity comes into play because you're looking at levels that are 2 orders of magnitude higher than typical background levels. Normally, the lifetime of ethane, we'll just take an annual average, is 2 to 3 months in the atmosphere, or more like 2 months. Pick a nice round number. However, when you look at the reactivity, the fact that now you are 2 orders of magnitude higher in concentration, the rate of reaction with hydroxyl radical, which is the primary removal mechanism of ethane from the atmosphere, you have to factor that in. So now ethane actually becomes important as a potential ozone producing molecule. So the fact that the concentrations are so high balance out the fact that the rate of reaction in the atmosphere is slow.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Sive.
So there is the twofold. It is in fact utilized in 2 different ways. Stop.
Mr. Vimont, in the draft that are the slides that you presented today, you showed I think a back calculation of the sources of the oil and gas emissions that showed warmer temperatures versus cooler temperatures.
Yes.
And did that exhibit tend to show that that the gas was coming solely from New Mexico sources, or was there also a significant Texas component to that?
That particular slide shows transport during high ozone events from both New Mexico and Texas.
Thank you. And then in the evaluation that you've done and the recommendations you're making here, have you given any consideration to the impact of the Oil Conservation Division's rules that are now restricting the flaring and particularly the venting of natural gas moving forward?
No, this was a measurement program primarily that we were showing and analysis of that data. There were no projections made. It's strictly what was happening on the ground in 2017 and 2019 at Carlsbad Caverns.
But to the extent that those rules might reduce the venting of natural gas, would you expect that to decrease local ethane concentrations around Carlsbad?
Honestly, I really don't know the answer to that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. No more questions, Madam Hearing Officer.
All right, thank you, Mr. Heiser. Mr. Rose, do you have questions of Mr. R or?
I think we're at Mr. Feynman, but
Well,
I think Mr. R's on.
I'm sorry.
It's been a while.
Mr. Feynman. Did you say no questions or do you have some?
I have no questions.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, Mr. Jano.
No questions.
All right. Mr. Boutier.
No questions.
Okay, Mr. Gutierrez.
No questions.
Okay, Mr. Newman.
No questions. Thank you.
All right, and Ms. Witherspoon, who may have
No
stepped
questions.
away. Oh,
No questions.
thank you. So I'm going to turn to the board members now. While I do that, if you are not a panelist and you have a question of Mr. Beaumont, please indicate that in the chat. Madam Chair, do you have questions of Mr. Beaumont?
Thank you, Madam Hearing Officer. Yes, I have a couple of questions. So I think on one of your slides, you had presented some data regarding the 8-hour fourth high ozone data between 2016 to 2022. And I was just wondering, how many, was it just from one monitoring station or were there multiple monitoring stations around Carlsbad that were utilized to capture this data?
This is at one station that we have in the park. It's up near the visitor center area, if you're familiar with the park. And it is just the one station. Now, as I indicated in my talk, the early years, we see 2016, 17, there we had a portable station, we call it, that was not a regulatory station to see what was even going on. And in the later years here, we have the full regulatory station there. So like the 73 for the 2020, we calculated the design value following the EPA guidance. We could also, you could go to the EPA's database that was referenced by the state earlier. Our data goes in there as well. So you could get that same thing from there. But it does, the 8-hour fourth high ozone concentration exceeds the ambient air quality standards in the park.
Thank you for that. And you answered all my follow-up questions in your response already. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Beaumont, and thank you, Madam Hearing Officer. Those are all the questions I have for now.
Thank you. Vice Chair Trujillo Davis.
Thank you, Madam Hearing Officer. I actually don't have any questions. I just wanted to thank you for your presentation.
Member Kate, do you have questions of Mr. Beaumont?
Yeah, I do. Sir, do you happen to know what the visitation count to that park is annually? And if we can take the COVID years, I guess, and set them aside, how many people visit Carlsbad annually? Do you have any idea?
I do not, but we do definitely within the Park Service have those statistics, and I can get them for you.
And so, do you feel like I'm guessing you probably don't know this one either, but I'm just wondering, has anybody ever done an economic impact study on how valuable that park is to the economy of that community?
Again, within the Park Service, we do those kind of economic studies. I don't know if we have it specific to Carlsbad Caverns, but I can also find that as a follow-up if you'd like.
Do you live down there, sir?
No, I am currently living up near Denver, Colorado, up in the foothills west of Denver. But
Yeah, and then I'm wondering if you think, if you've heard, if there's any evidence for the possibility that the oil and gas industry, as we're describing it here, and specifically with regard to the emissions, if we can call it that generally, has it affected the quality of the experience of visitors, do you think?
yes, certainly is well, ozone is a invisible gas. I mean, at some point, these levels that are above the National Ambient Air Quality Standard certainly affects the ability of some visitors to recreate outdoors. And aside to this, it's not an air quality issue, but certainly at night, looking out from the mesa out towards to the east, certainly the lights and the flaring are extremely visible from the park, rather than having a dark sky that we have experienced in a lot of parks. It's a semi-industrial sort of a look to it out there.
Yeah, and then just kind of a follow-up, just wondering about the impact on the, what's the word, on the, I don't know, the branding of the park, if it were a business, which it sort of is, but not really, but if it were, a product, do you think the product is has been blemished over the years by the, what we're talking about here?
Yes, I mean, within the parks themselves, parks are usually, not all of them, but most of them are usually in fairly remote areas. And when the park was first established, I think it would have been considered fairly remote, but they also have to be near oil and gas, and development of oil and gas is an industrial operation. So, as that has increased, yes, we normally think of parks as being pristine remote areas, and with development around the park, it's not as pristine and remote as it could be.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so what about the approachability? Now, I haven't been to Carlsbad in years, and I'm just, I've heard that the roads are congested and things, it's just it's harder to get around there than it used to be. Have you heard that kind of thing?
I have not, but I'm not down there myself, so.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, so my questions are, slightly off topic perhaps, but I appreciate it. So thanks for the testimony. Thanks, sir.
All right, thank you, Member Katz. Member Bitzer, do you have questions?
Do not.
All right, thank you. Member Garcia?
No questions.
Thank you, and Member Hunker?
Yes, I did have a follow-up to Chair Sweeney's question. The data collected in the 2019 study, was that all collected from the one station you mentioned earlier that's near the visitor center, or did you have some additional stations while you were conducting that study?
Most of what I presented here, the high resolution, high time resolution data that was collected, and one of the slides showed a picture of all the instruments there. It was near the visitor center. It's not right at the visitor center, but that general area, there's other Park Service office buildings and things there that we were near. That was all there. We did also collect the canister samples out in various places around the region at different times, and those were not included in this presentation right now. We're still analyzing some of that and seeing how it all fits together.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Weimont. No further questions. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member Hunker. I see in chat No one reaching out to request the opportunity to question. Oh, let's see. Member Bitzer has a question. Go ahead.
Sorry, I meant to ask this question, and then squirrel. Yeah, the data was collected on a quarterly basis through 18, 19, and 20. Is that correct?
Are you referring to the ozone data?
Yeah.
Well, actually, it's the instruments collect the data on like a 1 second basis. It gets aggregated into an hour, which then gets aggregated into these other things, and then it gets reported to EPA. I believe it's on a quarterly basis. But
I think I may have heard somebody else. I think I may have heard somebody else mention the quarterly report earlier. But I'm wondering if we have any data from the first couple of quarters yet from 2021.
We do. I don't have that on the tip of my tongue right now, but
that would be interesting to get a look at over the next couple of weeks, I would think.
Dr. Saib was actually down there. If he is still on the call, he may be able to tell you if he has seen any other exceedances in the last couple of months.
Dr. Saib, are you still with us?
I am, yes. I think July and August, we had, I think, about 8 exceedances, if I'm remembering, 6 in July. I know for sure 6 in July.
So overall, the trend is still upward, or is the trend between 19 and 20? Because it went down a little bit between 19 and 20. I think it peaked in 19 and down 1 point in 20. So are we trending down or up so far in 21?
I would say we have at least as many exceedances this year as sort of like 2019. This is just, this isn't referencing final data yet, and we aren't through the entire year either. But across the entire U.S. and I mean globally too, you saw decreases in things like ozone because of the global pandemic. So I think that's one of the reasons why we saw everything sort of tick down in 2020. And I would say comparatively 2021 looks to be more like 2019 than per se 2020.
And I would say that at this point, we can't make any definitive statements about any trends with 2021 data. It's not been finalized yet, but the preliminary data indicates that we are still exceeding the standard at the park.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Ms. DeVore, I appreciate your attempt to be helpful by putting certain links to data around the park in the chat, but nothing that comes through the chat is going to be made part of the record. So what I'd like to do, I really do appreciate you responding to Member Katz' questions with all of that. If you would yourself go to those links, PDF, whatever it is you find there that would be responsive, put a new exhibit letter on it, and send it to the service list, including Pam, of course, and Pam will forward it to the board members.
Okay, perfect.
Now I see Todd Hathorn has a question for, I'm not sure if it's for Mr. Vimont or Dr. Saib. When was the standard established?
Ooh, well, the current standard. Barclay, do you remember which?
I didn't hear the question. I'm sorry.
When was the standard established?
The ozone standard?
Yeah, this current one.
Was it 2015?
2015, okay.
I think we heard testimony about that earlier from the department, actually. Okay. Do you have anything by way of follow-up, Mr. Vimont, following all of these questions to you?
No, other than to say I think the evidence is fairly clear that there's exceedances of the ozone standard there, and that I think part of the solution is going to be looking at the oil and gas emissions in that area. I think that's what the data shows us.
All right, thank you very much. You're excused. And does that complete the rebuttal testimony on the ozone formation and monitoring from the National Park Service?
It does.
Thank you both very much. Well, we've been going now for quite some time, an hour and 20 minutes. So let's take a 15-minute break and return at 3:35. Thank you.